stocks. Reliance Communications is now up about 3.5%. That really is a stock which is now surging. In fact, let's pull out the intraday chart of Relcom. That stock is up about 3.5%. And pull out the other ones also. We've seen quite a bit of move, but Relcom really stands out.
All right, so the Department of Telecom says that spectrum trading shall be allowed only between two players, and the bans are earmarked for access services by licensor will be called tradable bands. Remember, this spectrum trading norms will allow mobile operators to better utilize their available airwaves and will help push consolidation in the sector as well. So now we are getting guidelines on these norms. Rajan Mathews, the Director General at COAI, joins us now to give us his response to this. Mr. Mathews, can you just tell us how to read these guidelines that have come out from the Department of Telecom today?
So first of all, I think kudos to the Honorable Minister as well as the DOT Secretary. They've moved in quick time to get the guidelines out on spectrum trading. On spectrum trading, of course, the intention is to allow the spectrum that is held by somebody to be actually traded, which means that you give up the right to own and you give it to somebody else who perhaps can use it more efficiently. So where this is going to help is, one, continuing de facto consolidation. So folks who feel that they might wish to exit the business can now get value for the asset, which is the spectrum. So that will be helpful. Secondly, if you can pull together spectrum, so if you had 2.5 megahertz of some spectrum and you need conjoined spectrum of 5 megahertz to offer LTE, then this is a venue to do it on a permanent basis. So ultimately it's going to be helpful to the consumer because more LTE, 4G type of networks can now be a candidate for rollout. So overall, I think positive for the industry, positive for the consumer. A few areas that we believe there are still some anomalies that we would like the government to continue to look at, but overall a good move for the industry.
Okay, it's a good move for the industry, but do you think with spectrum trading now being allowed, it would reduce a lot of M&A in the sector? Because, you know, instead of going and buying a company that has higher amount of debt, now you can just go ahead and buy spectrum.
Absolutely, I think that's bang on. One of the things that had happened is that when the original M&A guidelines came out, what happened almost in parallel was that the Companies Act got also changed, and there were significant changes brought about in M&A activity and reporting thereon. Most of the companies that are in our sector are public companies, so no longer was the DOT guidelines able to stand on its own. So that brought in an additional level of complexity, and so the spectrum trading and the sharing guidelines will definitely help as a substitute, if you will, for the M&A activity.
All right, just stay on. We have another expert joining us. Nitin Soni of Fitch Ratings joins us on the phone line. We have our in-house expert Reema Tendulkar joining us as well. Reema, before I toss to you, Nitin, I want to get one view from you on Reliance Communication, because that stock is really spiking up right now. And as we understand, there were hopes of a spectrum agreement with RelGeo very soon, and the company was only waiting for the final spectrum norms to come through. How would you read these spectrum norms, and how would you approach Reliance Communications? Is my voice reaching you?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on the show.
Sure.
So I think, it's largely positive and on the expected lines for the industry. We believe that this is beneficial for the smaller players who are really looking to exit this industry. So including Videocon, Tata in some circles, and smaller operators, including MTS, they would seek to exit from the industry by selling or trading their spectrum to larger companies. Larger telcos will benefit given they are spectrum starved. They don't have continuous spectrum in some of the circles, so they will look to buy spectrum from these smaller telcos which are underutilizing it and improve their network infrastructure. Specifically for ARCOM, we believe that ARCOM is, in the short term, they have already announced the spectrum sharing with Jio, and I think they will go along with that rather than coming out with a trading with the Jio or other companies, because trading is a bit more complex to negotiate between two companies. And I think largely they would focus on share merger with MTS and spectrum sharing with Jio for the next 6 to 12 months. That's our opinion.
Okay, my colleague Reema is also with us, so let's toss across to her. Reema, over to you.
Thanks, Sonia. Just a couple of questions. Mr. Mathews, if we still have you with us, could you tell us what the final guidelines are on the fee structure and if that in any way would be restrictive for trading?
Principal guideline is that one, yes, you have to trade the spectrum, i.e. you have to give up ownership. There's no leasing allowed. You have to do it over the whole LSA. You have to meet the 25% cap, i.e. you can't own more than 25% of the total spectrum in a LSA, which is a state or a service area. You have to also abide by the 50% cap rule within a spectrum band. The good thing about the trading is that it is applicable to all quote-unquote auction or liberalized spectrum. It does not get limited to just band-to-band, as is the case in spectrum sharing. It allows for optimization over the whole network, so that is a benefit. The anomalies, of course, that we highlighted are the fact that now when you trade the spectrum, the proceeds to the seller, if you will, gets included in the AGR, which we had said is almost a concept of double taxation. You paid for it already to the government at full market value. We had said, look, if there's a capital gain, fine, apply the capital gain on an IT basis, but don't ask the whole to a tax at 12 to 14%. Is an anomaly that we see in the process. And again, it is kind of limiting in the sense that the large operators are already pretty close to those headline numbers, the 25 and 50%. There are a few circles where they might benefit. So again, we've asked the government to take a look at those caps to see if the consolidation within the industry can be made more positive.
But Mr. Mathew, in the final guidelines, the two restrictive aspects that you told us, one, that the value of the transaction which will be given to the seller will be included as a part of his AGR or his annual gross revenue calculation, on which he pays close to about 12 to 14% of fees. So that's going to be a significant amount if you include the proceeds of the transaction. And secondly, even on spectrum caps, they will be applicable. So all these are a part of the guidelines. Is there scope for you to go ahead and appeal so that you can change it?
I don't know that there's scope for appeal, because these are obviously rulemaking from the government, and there's no scope for appeal. There's really scope for asking the DOT to consider what is the enabling additional changes that help meet the objectives. What were you trying to achieve? One, you were trying to achieve more optimal and efficient use of the spectrum. Two, you were trying to encourage consolidation so that unused spectrum could be used efficiently, and to provide an exit strategy for those who perhaps decided that they would leave.
With these restrictive factors in spectrum cap and the fee structure, do you still see trading taking place? How much of a hindrance?
We will see spectrum trading take place in limited circles. There are opportunities in circles. We won't see a pan-India type sort of M&A activity. We will see unlocking of specific assets within LSAs.
Okay. I believe you're also joined by Mr. Ashok Sud of AUSPI. Do we have him? Okay, I guess we'll...
Hi.
Hi. Could you first give your initial reaction on spectrum trading, the final guidelines that have been approved? What are the pros and cons? And how soon will we see the first leg of spectrum trading or a transaction taking place?
Well, I've just quickly gone through the guidelines a little while ago. On the face of it, they don't seem to be very different from what was expected. And the biggest problem that I can see just now is that the government is going to charge AGR on the revenues from spectrum sales. That I can see as the major sticking point that could come in the way of spectrum sales. Other than that, I think it's very good, it's very timely that finally the spectrum trading norms are out, and the doors are open for consolidation in the industry, which was required.
So how soon before we see a transaction taking place? Mr. Sood?
It's very difficult to say that because that would be between companies, but from whatever one hears, that in anticipation of the trading norms, many companies have been talking to each other over the last few months. And one would think, therefore, that now they are finally out. In the next month or two, one could probably expect to see some announcements.
All right, gentlemen, thanks a lot for your time. Reema, thanks to you as well for taking us through this news. By the way, the market has seen quite a bit of sharp recovery. Once again, reiterates the fact that this is not a market in which there's still a firm trend yet. In fact, pull out the intraday chart of the Nifty